بدايته فكرة، ناسين اللي فات ودايما باصين لبكرة، ومفيش حاجة مستحيلة تقدر علينا.
الجاي في حياتك انت عارفه ورسمه،
ده لكل واحد في حلم مكتوب باسمه، كل الحكاية وما فيها نتعب شوية.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم، والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد أشرف الخلق أجمعين. First of all, we'd like to thank the prestigious committee represented in Professor Ali Mustafa and Professor Ahmad Al-Kahky for accepting to participate in this viva. Thank you both. Professor Ali Mustafa, our dear friend from Mansoura University, Faculty of Arts. We have been friends for 29 years, and I'm happy to participate this panel with him. Of course, we also thank Professor Ahmad Al-Kahky, our dear friend and colleague, for accepting this invitation and to participate in. Thanks, sir. One thing, all of us, we would also like to thank Dr. Enji for being part of the supervision, a great part, of course. We would like to thank Dr. Amani and the other junior colleagues for attending, Dr. Rashad as well, and all the attendants. Before we start, we'd like to give a short statement about D.تنادى محمد شطة، حيث حصلت على ليسانس الآداب قسم اللغة الإنجليزية وآدابها بتقدير جيد جدا دور مايو 2007 من كلية الآداب جامعة المنصورة. اجتازت الباحثة المذكورة السنة التمهيدية للماجستير في الآداب قسم اللغة الإنجليزية وآدابها شعبة الدراسات الأدبية من كلية الآداب جامعة دمياط 2012. وبتاريخ 3/6/2013 وافق مجلس قسم اللغة الإنجليزية على تسجيل الباحثة لدرجة الماجستير في الآداب اللغة الإنجليزية وآدابها، تخصص الشعر في موضوع الذاكرة والهوية الأيرلندية في شعر إيفان بولاند. وتكونت لجنة الإشراف من كل من أنور عبد الكريم السابعطية، أستاذ ورئيس قسم اللغة الإنجليزية ووكيل كلية الآداب بدمياط للدراسات العليا والبحوث، أستاذ مساعد دكتورة إنجي صلاح توفيق، أستاذ مساعد الأدب الإنجليزي كلية الآداب جامعة دمياط. وبتاريخ 3/6/2013 وافقت لجنة الدراسات العليا على التسجيل، ومجلس الكلية بتاريخ 18/6/2013 على التسجيل، ووافق السيد الأستاذ الدكتور نائب رئيس الجامعة للدراسات العليا والبحوث على التسجيل بتاريخ 9/7/2013. وبتاريخ 22/7/2019 وافق مجلس قسم اللغة الإنجليزية على تشكيل لجنة الحكم والمناقشة على رسالة الماجستير الخاصة بالباحثة المذكورة، على أن تتكون اللجنة من أنور عبد الكريم السيد، أستاذ مساعد دكتور أحمد محمد عادل الكحكي، وأستاذ الدكتور مساعد علي محمد مصطفى. ووافقت لجنة الدراسات العليا بالكلية على تشكيل لجنة المناقشة والحكم بتاريخ 29/7/2019. وبتاريخ 5/8/2019 وافق مجلس الكلية على التشكيل المقترح. ووافق السيد الأستاذ الدكتور نائب رئيس الجامعة للدراسات العليا والبحوث على تشكيل لجنة المناقشة والحكم بتاريخ 12/9/2019، وقد تحدد ميعاد المناقشة اليوم الاثنين الموافق 2/12/2019 بمناقشة علنية بمسرح كلية الآداب جامعة دمياط. Now I call on د.تنادى to read her own synopsis.
In the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful, I should at first welcome the highly appreciated Viva examiners whose presence actually honors me. It gives me great pleasure to judge my modest work, and I wish it could come up to your growing expectations. Second, I should welcome all the audience who have come today to share me this moment. Thank you for your attendance and for your support. Memory and identity in Ivan Boland's poetry. The poet. Slide. Ivan Boland is an Irish poet. في slide مش موجودة مش عارفة. Ivan Boland is a great Irish poet who was born in Dublin in 1944. In fact, she led an unsettled childhood due to the work of her father, who was an ambassador to the Great Britain from 1950 to 1956, and then to the United States of America from 1956 to 1964. She was greatly influenced by her mother, who was a painter, Frances Kelly, and the influence of her mother has shaped most of her work as a poet, and this appears in her interest in minute depictions and portrayal with focus on details. Most of her poems are actually shaped by this crucial phase of her life. She was forced to leave her homeland to live in the country of the British colonizer, where she first experienced displacement, marginalization, and isolation. The second great influence on Boland is attributed to her mother, Frances Kelly, who was a painter. She repeatedly admits that she was her hero. Her influence manifests itself in Boland's minute portrayal and fascination with details, in addition to her recurrent references to other paintings in her poems. Introduction. Boland's poetry has been part of various studies focusing on the poet's nationalism, use of Irish mythology, as well as her post-colonial and feminist views. Catherine Kilcoyne was the first to shed light on Boland's deployment of memory and describes it as being strategic. Furthermore, Charles I. Armstrong asserts that Boland has managed to make connections between different forms of memory. The thesis focuses on two main concepts, which are memory and identity. Memory. The father of Romanticism, William Wordsworth, has stressed the significant role played by memory in writing poetry, and he described it as a thing divine. Dmitry Nikolin presents the postmodern view of memory as a tool for preserving and reproducing past images and events, whether they are personal or collective. He asserts that the postmodern inclination to subjectivity has led to the increasing dependence on memory. As for the second concept, which is identity, identity has gained much interest in the postmodern literature. The postmodern absence of objective reality and the vast technological expansion have forced people to retreat from this world of uncertainties and to assert their own subjective and collective identities. The assertion of the collective identity has been regarded as a duty by Jody Allen Randolph, and Boland proves to be up to this national responsibility. Chapterization. The thesis is divided into 3 chapters, preceded by an introduction and followed by a conclusion. The introduction highlights the purpose of the study, presents a review of literature, and determines the main concepts of the thesis, which it tends to elaborate on. The 3 chapters are arranged from the most private to the most general. They are arranged as follows. Chapter 1, autobiographical memory, Chapter 2, collective memory, and Chapter 3, traumatic memory. The first chapter is autobiographical memory. Evan Boland writes in Object Lessons, poetry begins where language starts, in the shadows and accidents of one person's life. In her biographical Object Lessons, Boland displays her conviction that poetry should be directly related to the poet's life. Moreover, in an interview with her, Boland suggests people are grateful to poems. Poems humanize people. Poetry records, eternalizes, and preserves all the human experiences, whether they are cheerful or painful. The chapter focuses on the following main points. At first, the use of the episodic memory as a technique of presenting the memories. Endel Talving has divided memories into explicit and implicit. Explicit memory, it's recollected on purpose, and implicit memory, which is unconsciously recollected. As for the explicit memory, it's divided on episodic memory and semantic memory. Semantic memory is the recollection of general knowledge, while episodic memory, it's the remembering of personally experienced events. It refers to information that is remembered within a particular temporal or spatial context. It includes the autobiographical memory. Autobiographical memory, according to psychologists, serves three main functions: self-definitional, social, and directive. Self-definition or self-representation is a means by which a person can affirm his personal distinct identity. Smith and Watson emphasize the role played by autobiographical memory in composing identities. Autobiographical poetry is different from confessional of the confessional one, which involves a sense of pain, just like the traumatic memories that will be discussed in details in the last chapter. In this chapter, Boland is searching for her own self in reproducing the images of both her mother and grandmother. In addition, she has managed to present her different identities by referring to memories from her different stages in life as a child, an adult, a wife, and a mother. She draws upon different memories of which she had a first-hand experiences and others that were recounted to her depending on the present situation that stimulates the past memory and the certain function it serves. It can be said that her autobiographical poetry has left nothing crucial in her own life and along her different stages unrecorded. At the same time, while presenting the various personal identities of the poet, social collective identities of all females and Irish citizens are also revealed. As for the second chapter, which is entitled The Collective Memory. Collective memory is the memory shared by a group of people who have the same origin and use the same language. Time and place are both the main motifs in this chapter. Each memory is presented within its temporal and spatial framework. There is always reference to famous events and places in Ireland. Jody Allen Randolph states, I read Evan Boland as one of the great poets of Dublin, of the statues, of the buildings, of the bridges, of the river. Though different studies have focused on Boland's presentation of the Irish history in her poems, the poet herself asserts that what really interests her is the human history. a view that is best proved in her poem Quarantine. A video of Poland in which she explains her poem Quarantine. Though she is recording the famine, a great catastrophe that had taken place in Ireland, but when she is tackling the famine, she does not focus on the incidents of the event itself, but she presents it in the form of a couple who have died during the famine. So what really interests Poland is not the historic event itself, but the human history. Poland depends in her depiction of the famine on the true memory of the death of a man and his wife in 1947. She presents an extended image of the working couple who kept struggling against the cold weather, hunger, and bad conditions, but they finally failed in sustaining themselves against all those toxins of a whole history. Poland observes in her object lessons there is a recurring temptation for any nation and for any writer who operates within its field of force to make an ornament of the past, to turn the losses to victories, and to restate humiliations as triumphs. If the poet doesn't tell the truth about time, his or her work will not survive it. Our present will become the past of other men and women. Only in this chapter, the unwanted gift of exile, as Poland claims, manifests itself. Her early expatriation has, on the contrary, intensified her desire to discover the past of her nation through reading books and listening to tales recounted to her, until at the age of 14, she returned to her homeland and began to discover it herself. Change is the recurrent theme in this chapter. Poland, most of the times, is preoccupied with recording the change in the Irish landscape. This theme actually conforms with the postmodern tendency toward denying the possibility of stable conditions. Her poetry has superbly succeeded in reshaping the Irish collective consciousness through the poet's constant recollection of the Irish most influential historical events, geography, landscape, language, cultural productions, and famous figures. Space, time, and the human agents are all integrated in most of Poland's poems to reaffirm the Irish nationhood that has long sustained social catastrophes and political disturbances. As for the last chapter, the third chapter, which is entitled Traumatic Memory. Traumatic memory is best defined as any disturbing experience that results in significant fear, helplessness, dissociation, confusion, or other disruptive feelings intense enough to have a long-lasting negative effect on a person's attitudes, behavior, and other aspects of functioning, and it's resulted from human behavior or natural disaster. Characteristics of traumatic experiences. They are socially shaped. We are traumatized by our societies. They dominate their victims' thinking, and their recollection is inescapable as they flash suddenly in the mind of the traumatized person. Childhood traumas are more severe. This chapter is overwhelmed with a sense of loss, resulting from different aspects of exile and displacement. Poland has experienced exile both physically and spiritually. As for the physical exile, it's represented by her early expatriation in London away from her homeland and mother tongue. The spiritual exile is represented by her early sense of marginalization in the literary sphere because of her gender, when she admits in object lessons that when I was trying to write poetry, the word woman and poet were magnetically opposed. Christine S.T. Peters stresses the broader significance of the concept of exile. She widens the scope of the experience of the Irish female expatriation to encompass the female experience of being exiled within Ireland by virtue of its patriarchal heritage. Boland's contribution to the Irish poetry is of great importance. She managed to defy the prevailing masculine poetic tradition and to find a space for herself through which she can re-examine the portrayal of woman and redirect it in a better way. This view is attributed to Simone de Beauvoir, who has propagated the necessity to overcome their submission to identify their distinct female identity by their own hands. She argues that the other is posed as such by the one in defining himself as the one. But if the other is not to regain the status of being the one, he must be submissive enough to accept this alien point of view. Boland rejects her description as a feminist poet, and she prefers to be called a feminist and a poet. She revolts against the intellectual marginalization of women and their imprisonment both in a defined stereotypical image, performing stereotypical domestic roles, and in the images of dolls representing mere external beauty, neglecting the female powerful mental abilities. She is not against the roles of a mother and a wife. She revolts against the female's passiveness and submission to the images imposed on them, as well as to their objectification. Conclusion. By reading the various volumes of Boland, the readers can get an overview of the poet's personal life, the history of her Irish nation, and the struggle of women to prove their real existence in a masculine prescribed world. Even Boland has asserted her intense sense of social and national obligation. Boland's poetry can be approached from different critical viewpoints due to its various themes and the various techniques she adopts. Boland has succeeded in redefining her own identity, the Irish national identity, and finally the female identity, respectively, throughout the whole thesis. The study has asserted the poet's competence in presenting the private and the social at the same time, to the extent that it's not easy to find a single poet that tackles only one personal or social, it's difficult to find a single poem that tackles only one personal or social aspect in isolation from the other. The thesis has actually revealed Boland's inclination to the romantics in her, dependence on the recollection of past memories, her tendency toward subjectivity, her highlighting of the communion between human experience and surrounding natural settings. Throughout the whole thesis, memory has been deployed with its different forms as a means to serve different functions, of which the assertion of the lost personal or national past to reconstruct the fragmented present is the most significant one. Memory has proved to be reconstructive in Boland's poetry. I should express my genuine gratitude to my eminent supervisors, Professor Anwar Abdul Karim and Dr. Inji Salah, for their patience, unstinting support, and valuable guidance. First and foremost, I should extend my sincere and warm thanks to my main supervisor, Professor Anwar, who has lent me generous academic and parental guidance. I have largely benefited from his extensive literary knowledge and from the chance he has given me to be one of his students as well. I owe him a lot for directing me to study the Irish poetry, which is rich in diverse experiences. His meticulous reading has helped me greatly during the writing process. He has really spared no effort to help me in conducting the thesis, and without his enthusiastic recommendation, it could have never been completed. Second, I should thank my co-supervisor, Dr. Inji, for her personal and academic support. She had strong belief in me and kept inciting me to work hard. She has actually revived my spirit when it was very low, and her remarks have been of great significance to the thesis. Special sincere thanks should be extended to Pilar Argaz, who hastens to send me full copies of her major books on Evan Boland. Once I emailed her and told her that I am deeply interested in her analysis of Boland's works. She has actually saved much time and effort for me to find her precious books. Finally, I should thank all the junior staff in the English department here in the faculty for supporting me, and I should thank my family, and thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, د.تنادى, for this comprehensive synopsis. Now we call on Professor Ali Mustafa to examine the students.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. I'm really honored to be here today, to be part of this distinguished committee, Professor Anwar Abdulkarim and Professor Kahky, and I'm really glad to be among friends, colleagues in this distinguished department in Dmyat. I'll try to be brief tonight. I'll just give you a few ideas, but before I start examining the thesis, actually I would like to extend my thanks to Professor Anwar and Professor Angie for their choice of the topic. A few weeks ago I was here discussing a thesis on Peter Horn, a poet from South Africa, Ines, and today we have another poet or poetess from Ireland. This is again a new area of poetry, a new area is explored. Actually, I'd like to thank the supervisors for choosing such areas to be discussed. And actually, I was very glad to read the thesis and to explore new ideas about poets. I didn't read in detail about them. The choice of the topic, of course, is very clever. An Irish woman, poet or poetess, she is preoccupied with the recollection of the glorious past of Ireland, with its sorrows, defeats, traumas, actually trying to remind the present generation with their past and to work and entice them to work for a prosperous future. The poetess is also preoccupied with the idea of the social marginalization of female figures. So the effort of your two eminent supervisors is quite clear in the choice of the topic, in the organization of the thesis, in the development of ideas and arguments. And the thesis as a whole is a very good piece of academia. It's a good academic work. You have done your best, actually, except for a few blemishes, which I'm going to point out quickly. You have the same problems with paragraphing. In one page, you have a whole page as a paragraph, and then next to this paragraph, you have 5 lines or 6 lines as a paragraph. So you have a problem with paragraphing. Most of the spelling mistakes, the use of wrong propositions, incorrect use of verbs, tense sequence, these things can all be attributed to the fact that you were in a hurry to finish your thesis, and I can attribute this because of the time limit, and I can tell you, as I told Ines a few weeks ago, maybe because of the computer, he made this such fatal mistake. Most of the problems you have here, تنادى, are in your documentation, which I'm going to talk about later on. Let me just give you a hint here. In your conclusion, you cited so many poetry quotations without giving me page numbers or the volume of the poetry used. When I read your conclusion again, I found that you used some quotations in order to support your ideas in the conclusion. You are not supposed to use any quotations in your conclusion because this is your conclusion, so you don't need to say فلان قال وفلان علان قال. It's just your conclusion. I advise you, don't use any quotations in or critical views in your conclusion. Again, in your works cited, usually when you use works cited, we don't say primary sources and secondary sources. You arrange all the sources in an alphabetical order. فأنت عندك دي موجودة, you have to do. Again, some of the titles of the books are not italicized. You did something, I felt that somebody was helping you writing the works cited. So part of it, you have books, titles of books written in italics, and the other part, the books are not italicized. So you have to go back and make this, correct this. Again, also you were very generous when you gave me, or when you included in your thesis, an extra copy of the English summary. While reading the thesis, I found an extra copy, 2 copies. So 1 copy is enough. حط نسختين. Again, I was lucky to have 2 copies. Again, you have a shift in pagination. When you started with works cited, you started with page 143, you see? And you concluded the previous chapter with 133, you see? So you should have
134. Okay.
You should have started with 134. Again, I enjoyed reading the comparisons you held with Sylvia Plath, Adrian Rich, and the Romantics. And actually, I hoped that you could have provided us with examples from the poetry of Plath, from the poetry of Rich, or the Romantics. But you only mentioned quotations from Bond.
I just give an example of Plath's Lesbos just once in the last chapter.
You?
I give an example of Sylvia Plath's Lesbos just in one.
Yeah.
Just one example in the last
You
chapter.
referred to Lesbos, but you didn't cite any lines of poetry. You see? You said that the poem talks about this. What I
Yes,
had...
viciousness in the kitchen. It's a
viciousness,
line.
yeah. What I have in mind is that you should have, when you said that she's like Sylvia Plath in connecting what is private and what is public, connecting
Yes.
what is personal and what is social. It would have made your comparison richer if you added some lines from Sylvia Plath. You see, we all know, have you read Sylvia Plath?
Yes.
Okay. If you remember that when she talked about her sufferings at the hands of her father after his death, of course, and she considered his death an act of treason, and then she linked her sufferings at the hands of her father to the sufferings of the Jews in the concentration camps. She wanted to universalize her sufferings. I think she is somehow similar to Bond on this, which leads us to the idea is that you should have made a shift. Chapter 2 should have been chapter 3, because this is actually her contribution, how she transcended what is private and what is personal to represent what is general and what is public. اللي هي النقلة من ان هي تعمل ايه personal sufferings, her personal suffering representative of the sufferings of Irish people. This would have been your contribution. But actually, when I read the thesis, I thought it would have been better if you made a shift, making chapter 2, chapter 3, and vice versa.
Okay,
this
I
is my.
That chapter 3 is concerned just with the Irish people, while chapter 2, while chapter 3 is more universal by focusing on feminist cause.
My idea is the shock of expatriation is part of her sufferings. Again, when she went to England at the age of 4 or 5, and she was alienated from her town, from Dublin. Anyway, this is my idea. But again, if you added lines of poetry from Blyth and Rich and the other romantics, you never mentioned W.B. Yeats.
Yes.
You should have. He is an Irish poet, and yes.
Their poetry was focusing on resistance and national causes.
Yes.
She focuses on the human experience, not the historic event itself.
Okay.
She presents the same issues, but with a different viewpoint.
Again, in my opinion, you didn't pay much attention to the use of Irish mythology.
Yes.
You mentioned 2 or 3 myths, and كنت بخيلة قوي.
I intended not to focus on Irish mythology because most of her works, or previous studies, focus on her use of mythology.
Focus
on the use of mythology in her poetry.
Yeah, I mean, in relation to the poet, you refer to Aeneas, the god of love. You said the god of love. Yes. He's the god of peace and love. And you should have provided us with a footnote, a remark telling us that Aeneas, the myth of Aeneas, who is Aeneas, the main idea of the myth, its relevance to the poem you only gave me just one line telling me that she began the poem by referring to the Irish god Aeneas, the god of love, and that's it. What I needed more, also you referred to another myth, it's called the daughter lost in hell. Actually, I had to go and find out about it. You didn't tell me anything about the daughter lost in hell. What I have in mind, or what I had in mind, is that you are referring to Bone's early childhood in London, away from her native town, Dublin, and Ireland. And I found out that there is some a very good article or part of a thesis. It's called The Descent into Hell in the Poetry of Ivan Bone, Ghent University, 2011, by Alexandra Cozy. Her analysis is beautiful. She referred to the comparison between Bond and Persephone. Are you familiar with the myth of the 4 seasons? No? يعني you should have listened to this in the radio, Egyptian radio. عندنا برنامج اسمه عذراء الربيع. We have Persephone and Pluto. Pluto is the god of the underworld. And Persephone هي إله النماء. Earth, Ceres is the earth. فبلوتو kidnaps Persephone in the underworld. Ceres bleeds for him and bleeds Zeus to interfere to bring her daughter back. And finally, some kind of agreement is reached where Persephone stays 6 months in the underworld. These are the 6 months of winter. روح النماء موجودة فين؟ in the underworld. فالأرض مفيش فيها إيه؟ خضرة ولا نماء ولا زرع. And the other 6 months she goes and spends the other 6 months with her mother on earth again, اللي هي summer و spring و vegetation. فهنا the comparison, يعني I thought you should have illustrated that when Bond compared herself or described herself as an exiled child, she likened herself to Persephone, who was kidnapped by the god of the underworld. And then هنا الcomparison برضو انت you didn't give me any details. I expected you يعني to have given us some explanation or notes about this myth, just to help us understand what you mean. And again, this would have added layers of meaning and layers, rich layers to your analysis. Again, I understand you should have referred to Seamus Heaney, W.B. Yeats, and the like. I don't want to take any time, but I would like to stop at you have some quotations in poetry without page numbers. In chapter 1, page 8, you referred to Poland and Bluff, and you should have given us examples how is the personal and the public are not presented separately. They are presented together in plot, and in order to show the comparison. Also, when you talked about Poland and the Romantics on page 21, you talked about subjectivity, recollection, and then you talked about the use of nature as the setting of experience to reflect the inner feelings of the speaker. Was this the situation with the Romantics? How did the Romantic regard nature? Nature was different to them. Nature, and استخدمتي Bond is not a worshipper of nature. She is a worshipper of the human experience. كلمة worshipper ديت لما نقولها على الرومانتيك ان هم احنا عارفين ان هم they were pantheists، بيحبوا وفكروا ان يعني اشبه بعبادة الطبيعة. كانوا بينظروا لها بان هي عند انت قريتي Tintern Abbey by Wordsworth, how he traces the development of his relationship with nature, and how he concludes with the idea that nature is the mother, the anchor of his purest thoughts, and so on. فهنا برضو you should have differentiated between the use of nature as used by Bond and Wordsworth. برضو when you referred in chapter 2, page 56, Poland and rich their concern with the suburbs. Again, how the place, يعني you mentioned a very good sentence, the place shapes the identity. هنا again, an example from Rich's poetry would have added to your comparison. عندي another element اللي هو you repeat yourself تنادى. You repeat the same ideas again and again as if you were worried for us to forget that she was the most important Irish poetess or poet, and she was supporting the cause of women and so on. والحقيقة يعني مثلا بلاقي مثلا the same poem is mentioned in more than one page in a different situation. True, you present another idea, but again, if you added different poems, would have been better. We have this idea of repetition. طبعا you have analyzed some of the poems in a beautiful I really liked the immigrant letters, domestic violence, on page 64 you give me the abbreviation ALB, and I looked for your abbreviation list.
Against love poetry.
ALB, page
Against
64.
love poetry.
Against, yes. But it is not included in your abbreviation list. مش موجودة في قائمة الاختصارات. Please add it. برضو عايزك تخلي بالك من التنس سيكونس يا تنادى. ما ينفعش ان انا ابدا الجمله الاولانيه. عندك مثال في صفحه 80 وصفحه 90. ما ينفعش طبعا titles of the some of the poems لما نقول the moving statue ولا statues. Is he referring to one statue?
Statues.
Statues? Okay, you correct it. Because I read it once as the moving statue and the other. أنا باخد أفكار سريعة بس كده. طبعا chapter 2 is the best chapter. I liked it very much. حتى في المراجعة يعني مثلا في أحد الجمل في صفحة تالي 29 the poet now begins وحطيتي بعدها appears.
لا ما أنا صلحتها في الإرادة.
حطيتيها في الإرادة. طيب ماشي لحقتي نفسك. برضو عندنا beautiful analysis of this poem in which the ancient history I learned this image of the doll. برضو في صفحة 98 the Irish myth of the story of the daughter who was lost in hell, the one I mentioned earlier. No illustration of the myth. On page 105 هنا her trauma is extended to express the trauma of the marginalized women all over the world. You have a quotation again on 106 and no page number. هنا نقطة التروما of marginalized women. الحقيقة I would like to know your personal opinion concerning the fact that there was war in the streets, and it seems that the poet was against the idea that women stayed home busy with their home chores and housework. يعني to my knowledge in England and in some other, I don't know about Ireland, they used to share in the secret resistance, women, and they did not only stay home as you said. فكان بيشتغلوا في الحركات السريه وبينقلوا اطعمه وبينقلوا حاجات. فانا انا عايز رايك يعني what do you think of this opinion of Poland? She was not happy with the idea that the woman is subjugated, is marginalized. Men are coercing them. الرجاله دول ناس شداد عليهم وقاعدينهم في البيت و imprisoning them in the kitchen. What do you think of this?
I think that it's a universal view because I have published.
But is it يعني what are the grounds of this universe? Is it true?
I'm concerning with the view of the male view of women.
But
the title of the book itself, we were neutral. We were neutral.
Well,
I think it's suggestive of her view that they should have taken a more important role.
يعني you think she was justified in her opinion that women are passive, they are not taking part?
No, they are not passive. She's not against the role of women as a mother and a wife, but she is against being so because it's imposed on them. Because there is no space for them to share in literary fields and other fields. They are regarded as intellectually inferior.
Okay, but this.
At first, she was publishing poetry.
What's your personal opinion about people talk about women's subjugation, women suffering at the hands of the cruel men? What do you think of this? What do you think? What's your personal opinion about this?
I think that although women are getting better rights and better positions in their life, but I think that there is still the male view that they are inferior. They are intellectually inferior.
And your tirade for the mimic muse, the poet mentioned the image of the beaten woman.
Which page?
Page, I think 113. 113. The beaten woman.
The beaten women.
Women. Okay.
Middle of the page.
It's not my own word. It's between inverted commas.
Yes, I know. These are the words of.
I think it's taken from the same poem.
Yes. What do you think of this? Was she exaggerating, or was she describing a real status of women at that time? خلي بالك إن هي she's going to extend this for all women all over the world. You see this. Was she exaggerating?
She herself imposed her own presence and literary sphere, and she, at the same time, there are several poems about her own life as a mother, and she's not attacking the status of women. She's attacking the view upon women like that.
Okay. Again, you have beautiful analysis of the poem, The Kitchen, page 112. When you come to the conclusion, again, it's very brief. يعني قليل قوي. I enjoyed reading the English summary. It was comprehensive, conclusive. It's better than the conclusion you wrote. فدي حاجة. Again, the work cited يا تنادى. يعني you have about 30 pages of references. This is too much, and most of them are electronic sources. Okay, يعني أنت مثلا في ال dictionary of literary terms you mentioned 3 dictionaries, Fowler and Caddon and others. Were you really in need for 3 dictionaries of literary terms?
I just want to make sure of the consensus of the same definition.
Let me tell you, we students always think that the more references they use, the more convincing and the more impressive their work would be. Actually, I can't imagine that you used about 270 reference book in your thesis.
More.
Yes. More 30 pages.
read
لو قلت
too
كل
much.
صفحة فيها 8 ولا 8 reference يبقى أنت بتتكلمي في 240 page 40 references. فأنا عايز بس إنك أنت all the students of postgraduate studies you should limit the number of references. أنت لو خدتي quotation من كل مرجع طب where is تنادى؟ أنت فين؟ أنت you should read, digest, and then rephrase or paraphrase and then لكن in every 2 lines you have a quotation. This is not actually to the credit of the work, you see? Anyway, for the Arabic summary I still have some you mentioned in your errata sheet 2 or how طبعا ما ينفعش الملخص العربي اكتبه من غير عنوان البحث، فلازم اكتب عنوان البحث. تنادى انت صلحتي حاجات في صفحه 2 قلتي الذاكره.
ايوه.
قبلها بسطرين.
والذاتيه.
قبلها بسطرين انت كنتي وقلتي صلحتي دي والتي كانت تعمل رسامه. دي فيها غلطه. صلحيها. عندك برضو في صفحه 3 فيما يتعلق في البعد فيما يتعلق بالبعد المكاني فتكشف العديد من القصائد. تكشف ولا يكشف؟ يكشف العديد او
لا
تكشف القصائد.
القصائد تكشف.
ما انت قلتي العديد. تمام. وبعدين كملي الجمله كده من القصائد على سرد. تكشف ما تكشفش بقى على البروبوزيشن هنا مش مظبوط. عندك برضو في صفحة 4 السطر 2 3 5 السطر السادس اللي هي ايه؟ خارج حدود مطبخها وهنا في جوهره. هنا دي مظبوطة ولا نقول وهذا في جوهره؟ مش أدق نقول هذا؟ وبالنسبة لهذا برضو انت جيتي برضو في البداية كده لو رجعت لصفحة 1 إن الارتباط المتوارث بين مفهوم الهوية المفقودة والحنين للماضي يشكل المضمون الرئيسي لإيه؟ مش لتلك الرسالة، أنت بتتكلمي على حاجة بعيدة لهذه الرسالة. فشيلي تلك وقولي إيه؟ هذه إيه؟ الرسالة. Anyway I try to be brief but despite the blemishes I mentioned you have done a very good work. Your thesis is very well written, very well organized. You exerted a great effort, and actually your effort and the effort of your 2 eminent supervisors is commendable. I wish you the best. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Ali, for your insightful observations and your meticulous reading of the text. I'm quite sure that all of us benefited so much from these observations. I especially thank you for commenting on that part related to mythology and the fact that Tonada should have got deeper into the study of the Irish mythology. And I'm quite sure that Tonada will do that, even though she might not add something to the study, but at least she needs to know something about the Irish mythology. We also appreciate your observation regarding the idea of pagination and documentation, repetitions, and of course the grammatical blemishes, and it was generous of you to call them blemishes. Sometimes I found some fatal grammatical
I
mistakes.
found them too.
طبعا ما يمكنش نقول عليهم blemishes أبدا يعني. It was generous of him to use this understatement. Anyway, thank you once again, our dear friend and colleague. Now we give the ground to Professor Ahmad Al-Kahky to examine the candidate.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. First of all, I'd like to thank Professor Anwar Abdikarim for giving me this opportunity to be on this very distinguished committee of examiners. I'd like to thank Professor Ali for accepting our invitation, for being here, and I'd like to thank him again for this very thorough investigation and appreciation of the work. We have actually benefited a lot from the remarks that he have just actually mentioned. And I think after what Professor Ali has said, my job is not actually that easy, because you've actually covered a lot of things that I wanted to deal with in my investigation. In a way. So my discussion right now is going to be divided into two parts. The first one has to do with the writing style, and the second one has to do with the theoretical background. And I promise I'm not going to take much. All right? Okay. Now let's start with the title page. Now you have here a wonderful title. Let me first comment on the title. You have here Memory and Irish Identity in Evan Bolland's Poetry. Well, this is very good, okay, because part and parcel of the study of Irish literature in general has to do with the memory, because most of all Irish poetry, drama, and even fiction has to do with the resisting of the occupation. Well, and some of the thesis has actually dealt very broadly and very, that's it, with the idea of that occupation. But here, I'd like to thank you for choosing this title, The Memory. However, we have here some things to deal with, just like I said. Let's start with the style. Now, you have here an MA thesis submitted by d.Tnadى, and it is submitted to which department? No department, all right? So this is the first thing. Now, there's something else. Now, please look at the end of the page, the bottom of the page. You have here the year 2019, but there's no mention of the city, no mention of the university. Usually we say, Dmyara University, or just Dmyara, or right, Cairo, or right, whatever. This is one of the things.
I put the
Now, of course, the cover page in Arabic is missing, and this is something that Professor Ali have just, mentioned. I'm not going to say it again. I have something to do with the separating pages between the chapters. So if you look, for instance, at the page that starts the introduction, the font here is actually very small.
Yes.
Very small, all right? So no, this is actually one of the things that we need to pay attention to. And of course, what we are dealing with here is actually something for the benefit of all the researchers and the students who actually write their theses, and because this is something that writing style is actually very important. Now, the page numbers. Why do we have the page numbers at the bottom? I mean, according to MLA, it is actually, yes, correct me.
I look at it as a higher studies, and this is the system of the faculty.
No, it is not. According to MLA, the researcher's name, family name, should be at the top right of the page plus the page number, all right? So it is not at the bottom of the page. Again, I'm not, you know, all of these remarks are very important because this is actually writing style, isn't it? All right.
It is not a matter of faculty system.
Yes.
We should follow the
Okay.
Okay. Now, I want you to go to the introduction, the first page, for instance, because I have here 1, 2, 3, 4 problems with.
Four.
Oh, all right. Okay. Thank you.
I have
Now,
discovered
look-
them.
Okay. Now look at the first page. Now the second line. Can you read the sentence right from the start, please? Evan Polland.
Evan Bond is the most leading female poet in contemporary Irish poetry, to which she has made an enormous significant contribution.
Why not? She has made an enormously significant contribution, all right? Because this is something that has to do with the structure of the sentences, and this is something that I actually I have noticed reading your thesis. And again, why do you all the time say poet, poet, poet? Isn't Boland is defending women's rights? Why not give her the poetess? Well, this is again one of the things. These are, you know, just remarks. Now, I want you to jump to line number. This is 2, 6. All right. This is line number 6, I think. All right. Furthermore, her father is nomadic. All right. First page, introduction. Nomadic. Why not itinerant? Because nomadic is a little bit, you know, I mean, going nowhere, having no certain direction or so, okay? No, okay? So itinerant is actually a little bit much more better. Now, I want you to turn the page to page 2 in the introduction, and please look at the first paragraph, something that starts with she, all right? Okay? Can you read us? Can you read for
The
us?
second line,
No, the first line, starting with she.
she's a co-founder of the feminist publishing company,
Uh-huh.
Erin House. This is, I corrected in the errata.
And go on.
I omitted she is and put and in.
Okay, go on.
Okay, and a member of the
No. Okay, before a member, she again.
I omitted she is
Okay.
and put and.
All right, okay.
Okay. And a member of the international writing program at the University of Iowa.
Iowa.
Okay.
Yep.
She's also a writer.
This is
and
number
has-
3. She, number 3. All right. Okay, go on. Go on, please. Okay. Go on. All right. Okay, so the following line, okay, she, all right, she is mentioned, all right, 6 times. 6 times in a paragraph. Where is the coherence? All right. Coherence has to do with the use of the name or the noun, then the pronoun, the consistent, you know, alternation between the noun and the pronoun. Again, this has to do with writing style. And this is actually something that I have noticed going on, you know, through your thesis. So you have this repeated again on page number 43, page 90. We don't have to go. Page 102, and so on and so on. Okay. Now, I want you to go to, this is actually page number 17 in the introduction. Page number 17 in the introduction. Now, I want you to go to the last line, and you have here stolen rights in,
Page 17.
page 17, the last page in the introduction.
Okay.
Last page in the introduction.
Okay.
Yeah, all right. So, woman trying to get hold of her stolen rights in?
I couldn't hear you well.
No, the line reads, line reads, woman trying to get hold of her stolen rights in a masculine literary life. Well, I have a problem here with the word masculine because it is actually used all the time. What's the difference between masculine, I'm asking, what's the difference between masculine and patriarchal? Can you tell us the difference?
Masculine, I think it's patriarchal is a more general term that reflects spiritual or intellectual ideas. The masculine may be more related to physical.
Well, all right. Well, if we are using the word patriarchal as a term itself, of course, this is actually used to refer to the conservative society that treats women in a certain way. Women are subalternated, women are inferior to men. Isn't it? This is what you want to deal with, all right? But masculine has to do with the prowess of the male, or having to do with the physical power, masculine, all right? So this is actually something that you need to deal with. Now, again, the word manipulation. We are going to come to it. The word manipulation, you say how she manipulates a certain idea. Now, manipulation as a word in itself has very negative connotations, all right? So you might say tackle, use, handle, but to manipulate, well, no. I don't think that Boland was manipulating anything. Yes. Now, page number 13. Page number 13. There is something here that the quotation that ends with 185. These are 6 lines from the bottom. All right. You have here a
Page 30?
13.
13. Okay.
Okay. Now these are 6 lines from the bottom. We have here the end of the quotation, 185. Before the quotation marks, you have what? We have here a colon. In their own tongue, then we have a colon. Okay? Well, I actually, I'm not going to say much about this because this actually has to do, with proofreading. All right? So proofreading is actually one of the things that you just. Okay, now page number 17. Page number 17. Now, I have here the sentence that starts with identity. These are 4 lines from the bottom.
Identity and memory. Identity and memory are interdependent in nature.
That is to say, the poet reconstructs her identity through the recollection of certain specific moments, and at the same time she recollects certain single moments that are closely related to her present identity and how she actually becomes, despite past despair. Right. This has to do again with very long sentences. Sometimes they are run-on sentences, and I'm actually having a problem with these, the run-on sentences. You should have actually used transition signals, right, to connect between the clauses. All right, but the run-on sentences is something, again, that is throughout the thesis. This is something that actually that I didn't like about the thesis. Now, the use of prepositions. Now, we have, for instance, on page number 6 in the introduction, page number 6 in the introduction. All right. Now, the first paragraph, this is 1, 2, 3, 4, all right? 4 lines from the bottom of that paragraph. Can you start reading from the fact that the poet, read please.
3, 4. Page number?
Page number 6 in Latin letters, in Latin, all right? In the introduction.
The fact that the poet depends mainly on her own personal memories or those Irish nations.
Okay.
Nation has made the understanding of balance.
The fact that the poet depends mainly on her own personal memories and those,
Okay.
missing, all right? Okay, this is something, again, that has to do with the use of prepositions, because this is something that has to do, again, with proofreading. This is
It's
throughout.
writing mistake.
Okay, all right. I've told you that the first part has to do with the
sorry.
writing style. No, you're not sorry. You're not sorry for anything. Okay. Now, page number 99. Page number 99. 99. This is a quotation from a poem. Okay, what's wrong with this quotation?
Which one?
The quotation on page number 99.
Okay.
There is something wrong with it.
Which line?
The one that starts with, when all of England on an Irish child. Can you see it? All right. What's wrong with this quotation? There's something wrong. Okay, okay. Let me help you. Let me help you. Well, the first letters of all the lines of verse.
They are the lines of Poland, and she writes like this. There are several deviations in her writings, and I have her poems.
Okay.
She writes like this.
Okay, but you did not actually refer to this after you quoted. Okay, this or actually you used this quotation, right? Because this is something that has to do again with the features, the style of the poet itself or the poetess itself. So you need to do what? You need to, to comment on this. All right, now we are almost done, actually we are done with this, but there is one thing left in the style, and it has to do with the works cited. Now, I was kind of astonished that I have at the end of your thesis 30 pages of works cited. 30, all right? 30 pages. What's the difference between a bibliography and a works cited?
Okay, bibliography are the books which are suggested to consult, but works cited the books that I have already consulted.
Excellent. All right. So, if we take, for instance, something like, let me see, page number 167, 167. All right. Can you tell me where it is used in the thesis?
Yes, I omitted the quotation and I forgot to omit.
Wow. You omitted the quotation and it is still on your work cited?
Okay.
This one, and this one, and this one, and this one. No, actually, all the quotations on this page. I mean, like the second one. I mean, the one above it.
Yes.
Okay. Where can I find it in the thesis?
I omitted the quotations.
30 pages.
Okay, sorry.
And I actually counted them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, so again, on page number 10,
In the first chapter?
yes, page number 10. Okay, now I have here, this is line number 6, and between brackets we have hardy and gay. Page number 99. Can you locate this on your works cited? I can't find it. No. Hardy is gone. Hardy is gone home. No Hardy and no gay. Work is cited. Okay. Writing style. This is something actually. This is actually one of. This is the core of the right. Okay. Again, page number 1 in the introduction, the last line. The introduction, the last line.
Just a minute.
Introduction, first page.
Yeah, just a minute.
Introduction, first page.
As for the quotation, the work cited. Hardy and Gay at page 146.
Okay, 146.
They are the translators of Aristotle's physics.
Okay, which one?
The last one at the bottom of the page.
Okay, but you actually Aristotle. All right, so
And this is not written.
yes,
Review.
yes. Okay. Now I want you to.
They are the translators of the book.
Okay, but actually, when we quote the author itself, you're right, because we do not actually no translation. We do not do this because these are not the words of the translators. All right. Now the first page in the introduction, please. The last thing that
The
has
last page.
yes, the last thing that has to do with the writing style. Well, the last line here, Britain's Poetry Review. Where can I find it on the works list? It is actually the same problem.
Okay, I added it in the errata.
In the errata.
Yes.
Thank you. Now, we are done with this very, silly thing, okay? But again, let me tell you that these are the rudiments of academic research writing, of course, and this is something that has, to pay attention later on in your research papers. Okay, now the first chapter. Now you are dealing with autobiographical memory. And this is actually, again, just like I told you, I congratulate you again on choosing, this topic. I mean, the topic of memory, because again, this has to do mainly with Irish poetry as a resisting kind of poetry. Now, reading this chapter, you are actually giving us your own first personal impression, commenting on the poems, one after another, all right? Now, why didn't you depend on secondary sources, and you have so many here, in supporting your own appreciation of the poems? Your appreciation is fine.
Okay.
It's fine, okay? You are a poetess yourself, all right? But let me ask you again, why do we have this? Can you comment? Can you tell us?
I attempted to have a part that is mine. I thought that if I resort to quoting from the paraphrasing or analysis of others, it may be a sort of plagiarism, and I have to express my own view.
Well, all right, okay, but let me explain.
It
all
was
right.
my intention.
No, let me explain. As an academic, researcher, you have a hypothesis, فردية, and you are trying to support this hypothesis with what? With support, all right? So it is not mainly your own first personal impression. We need some other, scholars, people with other, capacities to support your own opinion.
As for Evan Boland's poems, they were not easy for me to understand at first. I depended greatly on her biographical book, Object Lessons, The Journey Between Two Maps, interviews on the YouTube, or some interviews that are published in Evan Boland by Judy Allen Randolph, critical review also. I depended mainly on this chapter on her own views and how she applies what she preaches in her poetry.
Let me give you a little example here. On page number 3, for instance, we have here this paragraph that starts with autobiographical poetry. Then right in the middle of this paragraph, we have here, herein lies the necessity to show the difference between confessional and autobiographical poetry. Then you said something, go on reading, you said something about remembrance, all right? There is very, very few words mentioned about remembrance. You should have actually elaborated more on the idea of remembrance, especially that you have here Susanna Radstone, all right, explaining what is remembrance, but actually this is not given enough elaboration. So it is not only about showing from the first source or the primary source, I mean Evan Boland's poetry. It has also to do with secondary sources. You need to show or to support your discussion from secondary sources.
Most of the works on Boland were focusing on mythology, nationalism. Little that was, I found little works that focus on her autobiographical poetry.
Okay, and there is something else. You spoke about, her being influenced by the Romantics. Well, which feature, all right, does it has to do only with memory, all right? Because in the poems here, there is mention of nature, and there is nothing like transcendence, and how nature is actually, there is that element of transcendence. There are other features of the Romantics. You should have actually dealt with them as long as you are dealing with.
I focused on subjectivity, the tendency towards subjectivity, the communion between nature and man.
أقول all right, in passant, يعني very fast. You did. I don't say that you did it. You did, all right, but fast, all right? But this should have been actually given much more effort of elaboration. Now let's move to chapter number 2, please. All right. In chapter 2, you are dealing with collective memory. And again, I have something to ask here. Well, in more than one incident, in one, part of this chapter, you spoke about the remembrance of place and time.
Yes.
Isn't it? All right. So, and you did not actually tell us much about how you relate between Yvonne Bolland remembering a place, a statue, a street, or a member in the parliament, and collective memory, all right? After all, most of the examples here are still deal with her own, personal memories. So I think, this is my own opinion actually. I think that instead of collective memory, you should have actually said chronotopic memory, because chronotope has to do with what? Time, the relation between time and place, and how they affect, one another, and how the author, right, is actually dealing with this idea. So chronotopic memory should have been actually a better, title for the page, a title for this chapter, all right? So, because in most of the quotations that you used here, you did not actually show this relation between remembering a statue, for instance, and the collective memory of the Irish people. I have no connection at all explained to me while I'm reading this. Can you find me a quotation or give me an example in which you elaborated on that relationship between remembering a place or remembering a time and the collective memory of the Irish people?
At first, when I began to read her poems, it was something that is apparent that whenever I read any poem about Ireland, she stresses the word Irish. She gives a certain year in the title. Even in different experiences, she insists on enumerating different places, following each other in 3 or 4 lines. This attracts my attention.
Okay, when was Bolland born? When she was born?
In Dublin.
No, when was...
1944.
1944. And does this date mean anything?
What?
Or isn't it, the Second World War, right?
Yes.
Isn't it has to do with, a lot of turmoil going on in the world, all right? So you should have actually linked between the places and the times that she remembers and other incidents, and you should have actually elaborated or related between these places. What is the significance of remembering a statue or mentioning that this is a statue in a certain place in Ireland? How can this be collective memory? Unless this is your job as an academic researcher to show, to elaborate that there is indeed a relationship, that the poet is actually referring to this statue in connection to a certain memory, isn't it? All right, so this is, this is what I've got to say about, okay. Now, the third chapter, and let's move on. The third chapter, this has to do with trauma, isn't it? Okay. Right. Tonight, I want to ask you, what is trauma? Very simple.
Okay. Trauma is a physical, either a physical or spiritual injury that is caused.
واحدة لحسن أنا يعني.
Physical, psychological.
Okay, so it is physical, psychological. Go on.
Injury that is caused either by a catastrophe or a natural catastrophe or a shock.
Good. Okay. Okay. Good. But in this chapter, you are mainly dealing with trauma in a different way, all right? Because part of the chapter, the final part of the chapter, for instance, you are dealing with women resisting, or actually the poet is expressing this idea that she doesn't like the statue or the position of women as inferior to men. Okay. And her poetry is a kind of a resisting, expression of this position, of the inferiority of women. How can this be defined as traumatic?
This is obvious in her book, A Journey Between Two Maps. She stresses how when she attempted to write poetry, at first she was rejected, and at first she published some poems without mentioning her name. And she felt that it's not, there is not space for women to be a poet. The quotation which I omitted about...
Please allow me, let me ask you, where is the injury that a poetess is not able to have a position on the map, on the literary map? Where is the trauma? Where is the injury, physical and spiritual? I mean, an accident, something, like an attack, something disastrous happens. So, yeah.
In several of her books, she repeatedly refers to this, that she was suffering from this view, that she was not able to impose her own view. This is conforms with Elaine Showalter's idea of gynocriticism, that women should have their own works in which they can give a better depiction of women by women themselves.
Okay, so again, I cannot see a trauma, because trauma, allow me to say that trauma has to do with something very shocking, something disastrous that happens to a person, that affects their psychology. Are you following?
Yes.
Psychology affects their psychology in a way, let me finish, in a way that makes it difficult for the affected person, so difficult for the affected person to get rid of the traumatic memory. And the way that a person can heal is by remembering.
Yes.
And this is something that has to do with the subject of your thesis. So I think that Bolland is writing her poetry in order to resist. And this has to do with resistance. So if you are dealing with trauma, you should have actually mentioned, or you should have actually dealt with studies done on trauma. Kathy Karoth, for instance, has more than one book dealing with trauma, all right? Trauma and remembrance. Trauma, it has to do with trauma and history, for instance. So you need to depend on other sources, all right? And I think
I depend on the definition on page 89.
Okay, but the definition here comes from a dictionary, isn't it? All right? Dictionaries. Now, if you are dealing with psychoanalysis, or you are dealing with psychoanalytic, trauma is actually such a huge trend in literature. So if you're dealing with such a huge, term, you need to go to the specialized books. I think that the third chapter should have been given the title of Resistant Memory and the Female Irish Identity. Resisting memory, because you are not dealing with, anything that has to do with women alone, but you are dealing with social memory, you are dealing with women, you are dealing with the position of women. So it has two things, social, all right, because there are some things in society that Bolland was against, and she is remembering them. And there is something that has to do with the position of women. So these are two ideas in the same chapter. So I think that the chapter should have been given the title Resisting Memory, because this is a memory to resist. Resisting Memory and the Female Irish Identity. All right? Because this is actually something that has to do with most of the quotations and most of the examples that you've dealt with. Yani, female Irish identity. resisting memory, and the female Irish identity. Yes, go on. Yes, please.
The definition which I built my analysis on is taken from a dictionary of psychology.
Okay, one. Trauma, again, Tanada trauma. Trauma is such, an important trend in literary creation and criticism. And if you choose it as a title for your chapter,
I read many articles from psychology, but they are related to neuropsychology.
Let me ask you another question. Is Boland here dealing mainly with trauma or the resistance? She doesn't like the position of women in the kitchen. She doesn't like women to be inferior. So she is criticizing the social position of other people and women. So she is resisting these things that she doesn't like, isn't it? All right? But trauma itself is something else, quite different. If you want to impose this on the chapter, all right, or to show us, because this is your hypothesis, you need to support it, not with just one quotation, all right? Okay, I'm done. ويا رب ما يكونش يعني كان زعلتكم في حاجة. Okay. Okay, but thank you to Nada for this paper, all right, for the thesis. I like the title, all right, and of course I'd like to extend my thankfulness to Professor Anwar for his supervision, and Professor Inji as well. Thank you both for such great work. Of course, this is a human endeavor, and every human endeavor has its own, good things and bad things. All right? No hurt feelings. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Professor Ahmed, for these great observations. I personally benefited from them, and I have to agree with you, not have to, but I do agree with you on the idea that trauma here is out of place. Because when we talk about trauma, we're talking about a serious physical or psychological injury, not injury, it's injury.
This is not a good one.
And I think that Boland was not exposed to any of them. Was she? Was she? Was she exposed to an accident, for example? Did she witness a natural disaster?
Trauma is not only caused by natural disasters. We are traumatized by our societies. There is a quotation which is like that.
What causes trauma, Tonada? What causes trauma?
I analyzed these events as traumatic according to certain definitions that or characteristics of a trauma, which it always persists in appearing in her works. She repeatedly refers to them, that their remembrance is inescapable.
All of us, Tonada, suffer from daily burdens and daily stresses, but do we call a brief stress a trauma? يعني لو واحدة مثلا جوزها زعق لها كده نقول she has been traumatized due to a verbal quarrel with her husband.
If she's sensitive.
We can call it a trauma if she has been physically exposed to a beating, or she was injured. She has been psychologically tormented, but do you have something to say, Dr. Inji? So I quite agree with Dr. Ahmed that the idea of trauma is much greater than what we already have in this chapter. So I'll go by his advice. I'll follow his advice to change the title of the chapter. Yeah. Okay, thank you, Professor Ahmed, once again. And I have a question for Tunada, and it would be the last today. Tunada, we have 3 types of poetry: the personal, or what we call the subjective, the autobiographical, and the confessional.
Yes.
So we have the personal,
Subjective.
the autobiographical, and the confessional. Can you differentiate among the 3 types of poetry?
Okay. As for autobiographical, she displays she recalls certain events or incidents that she has passed through. Of which she may have a first-person experience, or she may have knowledge of it by another person. As for the confessional, it involves a sense of pain, something that is related somehow to trauma. For example, when she's referring to her something like her humiliation as a child when they were mocking her while she was using the Irish accent. This may be a sort of confessional poetry because it involves a sense of pain. As for subjective...
And how is it different from the personal poetry? How is it different? From
personal poetry,
or subjective poetry?
Subjective poetry, that the poet presents his own view, or presents the depiction is not objective like the Victorians, for example. He imposes his own view and his own presence in the poetry.
But this happens in autobiographical poetry. Still, there are many subtle differences. I'm not satisfied, Tunada. I'm not satisfied with your answer, and you need to read deeper about this. Okay? Because it is, the differences are much greater than what you superficially state now. It all depends on the persona created. In personal poetry, we may have a persona speaking her own or its own feelings and thoughts in a way which comes similar to that of the poet himself. But still, the persona and the creator are 2 different entities. Okay? In autobiography, the hero is the poet himself. You can easily identify the poet, as the hero. When he says I, it is the poet himself, not a persona. You see? And when we talk about confessional poetry, we are talking about that deep and tense pain hidden inside the layers of the psyche. And these hidden pains are to be revealed very personally by the poet or the poetess, you see. I think that both autobiographical poetry and personal poetry do not come to a true and sincere revelation of the inner psyche as confessional poetry does. يعني الكونفشنال بوتري ده الاعترافي ده حاجات مدفونة في الأعماق، حاجات ما بيحاولش حتى الشاعر في الشعر الاوتوبيوغرافيكال او الشعر الشخصي انه يقرب لها، لانه بيعتبرها احيانا تابو او احيانا يعني it's something عيب to talk about them in public, but a confessional poet does so. Okay, here we come to the end of this examination. I really like to thank Tunada for bearing up with our humble requirements. I mean both Dr. Enge's and my own requirements. We have tried to help her in a way that would push her in the future to be a PhD candidate. Tunada has proved to be a very slow scholar. يعني بتشتغل على نار هادية قوي. But at the end, I hope she will prove to be a distinguished yet faster one. Inshallah. Thank you, and we will excuse ourselves for a few minutes to make a debate, and then we will come back to announce the results of the Thank you very much.
والله العظيم يا تنادى كنت جميلة وكنت convincing جدا، وكان واضح ان انت قريتي كل الكتب ال 33 صفحة انت قريتيهم كلهم، عشان كده كنت عارفة بتعملي ايه وكنت هايلة، و I'm very 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 proud of you. وانت من احسن الناس اللي انا شفتهم في حياتي، وانت احسن واحدة شفتها في حياتي.
ان شاء الله.
عايزة اكل حياتي.
خدي كلمي ماما قولي لها مبروك، خدي المايك قولي لها مبروك يا ماما.
مبروك يا ماما.
أنا عايزة أقول إن الدكتورة تنادى من أجمل الشخصيات اللي اتعاملنا معاها خلقا وعلما، ويا رب مزيد من التفوق في المستقبل بإذن الله، ونفرح بيها دايما يا رب.
خلاص ألف ألف مبروك وعقبال الدكتوراه في أسرع وقت ممكن وإن شاء الله.
يعني today is a special day, a very special day عشان تنادى أخذت الماستر يعني، وأنا الحقيقة سعيدة جدا جدا بأدائها النهاردة، وكانت يعني she defended herself very well و she was very confident، وأنا كنت مبسوطة جدا جدا، ويعني I'm looking forward عشان أشوف الدكتوراه إن شاء الله.
ألف مبروك دايما وعقبال الدكتوراه إن شاء الله بأسرع وقت زي ما الدكتورة عبير قالت.
أنا ما بعرفش أتكلم كتير.
هو النهارده احلى يوم لنا كلنا، وكل اصحابها وحبايبها بيحبوها، وعقبال الدكتوراه وعقبال دكتوراه للميس وسلمى ان شاء الله.
I can't speak my heart، بس طبعا كل المشاعر واصله انا عارفه.
طبعا انا قد ايه النهارده انا فخوره بيها وفرحانه بيها. طبعا لحظه مستنيه بالنا كتير قوي قوي قوي. طبعا كان المفروض مستنيه بالنا كتير، واتمنى ان شاء الله ان تاخد الدكتوراه في اقرب وقت ان شاء الله.
ماما يلا
ألف مبروك وربنا يسلم بخير وإن شاء الله عقبال الدكتوراه والأحسن والأمام بإذن إن شاء الله يا رب.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ببارك لأختي العزيزة الدكتورة تنادى، وأتمنى لها إن شاء الله حياة دراسية أفضل بإذن الله، وحياة عملية طبعا بعد الماجستير، وأكيد هتبقى مبسوطة. يعني قولي لي بقى إحساسك إيه بعد المناقشة؟ ضيعت وقت في إيه؟ مش عارف،
بس يعني
بعد
لازم اكون اجرأ من كده
ان شاء الله. اتمنى في الدكتوراه تبقى اجرأ من كده ان شاء الله، وتعملي دكتوراه كده على اعلى مستوى. واهم حاجه ما تنسيش الشوكولاته.
مش هنساه طبعا، ده اول حاجه. انا قلت حضرتك مش هتقول.
الشوكولاته الدارك، انا سبتك لما تناقشي اهو. نوار، شوكولا نوار، طالما بقى شوكولا نوار. والف الف مبروك وعقبال ان شاء الله اولادك كده ان شاء الله.
يعني النهارده يوم فعلا الواحد فيه فرحان جدا جدا، لان النهارده بنحتفل بمناقشه الماجستير بتاعت الدكتوره تنادى، وهي زميله عزيزه معانا من زمان من ايام كليه التربيه. ويعني النهارده تتويج لفعلا مشوار شاق ومتعب، بس الحمد لله نهايته هي حلوه، وان شاء الله ربنا يوفقها في اللي جاي، وعقبال الاستاذيه وعقبال بقى المناصب القياديه وهكذا في الجامعه.
تقرير لجنة مناقشة الرسالة المقدمة لنيل درجة الماجستير في الآداب اللغة الإنجليزية وآدابها تخصص الشعر من الباحثة تنادى محمد شطة. اجتمعت اللجنة المشكلة من أنور عبد الكريم السيد عطية، أستاذ ورئيس قسم اللغة الإنجليزية ووكيل كلية الآداب بدمياط للدراسات العليا والبحوث، أستاذ الدكتور أحمد الكحكى، أستاذ مساعد الأدب الإنجليزي بكلية الآداب جامعة دمياط، أستاذ الدكتور علي محمد مصطفى، أستاذ مساعد الأدب الإنجليزي بكلية الآداب جامعة المنصورة، وذلك في يوم الاثنين الموافق 2 ديسمبر 2019 بمسرح كلية الآداب جامعة دمياط لمناقشة الرسالة المقدمة من الباحثة تنادى محمد شطة، وموضوعها الذاكرة والهوية الأيرلندية في شعر إيفان بولاند. وقد استغرقت المناقشة ساعتين ونصف، وقد اتضح مما سبق وبمناقشة الباحثة في موضوع الرسالة تبين أنها تجيد مهارات البحث العلمي وتكتب بلغة إنجليزية مرضية والمراجع كافية، لذا توصي اللجنة بالإجماع منح الباحثة تنادى محمد شطة درجة الماجستير في الآداب اللغة الإنجليزية وآدابها تخصص الشعر بتقدير ممتاز.
سعداء النهارده وكان يوم جميل، كان محفل علمي جميل. بتمنى لها التوفيق يا رب في حياتها يا رب كده، عقبال ما نشوف الخير ليهم ولأولادها كده تفرح بيهم يا رب بإذن الله.
النهارده يوم مختلف، بشكر جدا الدكتورة تنادى، احنا مستنيين اليوم ده جدا من زمان، والف الف مبروك للماجستير وعقبال الدكتوراه ان شاء الله.
مبروك وعقبال الدكتوراه. الحقيقة أنا بشكر اللجنة شكر خاص، بشكر السادة المشرفين دكتور أنور ودكتور إنجي على تعبهم معايا، بشكر دكتور علي مصطفى والدكتور احمد الكحكي على توجيههم ليا ونصايحهم والإرشادات اللي وجهوها ليا، أكيد هتفيدني بعد كده كتير. شكرا.
أنا لست ممن قال كان أبي، بل قلت للأكوان هانذا. عزم وإصرار ملا قلبي، لم يثنني قول لذاك وذا. أنا ندى أروي الحياة سعادة وتفاؤلا. ندى لا مستحيل يعيقني في الكون لا. كم قال لي بعض ستبقى هنا، انظر لطول الدرب لن تجني. ما كنت أسمعهم فذاك أنا، حر طليق واثقا أبني. أنا ندى أروي الحياة سعادة وتفاؤلا. ندى لا مستحيل يعيقني في الكون لا. ليس دربي من ورود، كان شوكا قاسيا طول الطريق. إن تعثرت ألاقي من يجود، حب أهلي قربهم صدق الصديق. لست أنسى أنني يوما سعيت فارتقيت كي أغني للوجود. أنا ندى أروي الحياة سعادة وتفاؤلا. ندى لا مستحيل يعيقني في الكون لا. سعادة وتفاؤلا. أنا ذا لا مستحيل يعيقني في الكون لا.
شركة مونو ميديا ترجو لكم دوام المناسبات السعيدة.